Again, page design. Four lines from the bottom. Line begins with chochmah, vechesed. Okay. And we're discussing the principle of Atzilus being a memutza between Oil and Soif and world. And this memutza phenomenon is facilitated by the fact that in Atzilus there are these two, the representation of both of these inyanim, Ayin, Soif, and world, in the form of Oir and Chayli. The principle, there is the seven spheres, or 10 spheres, starting from chochmah, and the principle in of the spheres, the individual identity of each one is at the level of keli, rather than at the level of oir. And as we discussed yesterday, that at the level of oir, there is not a presence of the different koiches, although they certainly do affect the function and so forth, but that is not what the function is, how the function is enabled, not through chochmah vechesed. Like we said, when a person walks, we don't say his feet are walking. He is walking. From the perspective of Oyer, this is always emanating from the nefesh itself, the reality of it. And as we also pointed out, I hope eventually we'll understand the difference. A person is not walking. A person is going someplace. This going someplace is a much higher perception than walking. Both. On the one hand, going someplace is a much higher perception, and the feet cannot relate to it. The feet are not going anyplace. The feet are walking. This is where we're saying the kelim are really a metzias, a worldly metzias, a presence that of a created entity. The oir, that represents the oir and Soif. Again, going back to the moshel. In a human being, we say that Odom she'ein lo bayis ein lo Odom, that having a house is not definable by its functionality. A house is a place where I could sit, where I can sleep, where I can eat. That's not what a house is. The principle of the house emanates as an expression of the etzem hanefesh of the human being, to the extent that ein bayis ein lo Odom. So that is where it is a gilui, so to speak, an expression of the etzem hanefesh of the human being. But then, of course, that itself is further elaborated upon and developed So that yes, in the house you have all kinds of conveniences. This is the way the kelim that bring the house closer to the person on a functional level. This is not the initial definition of it. This is why we say that Atzilus is a memutza. It actually brings Ayin Soif to world via the kelim within Atzilus itself. It is even possible, like in going back to our muscle, if I may, it's even possible to explain to a person within worldly parameters, not going back to the etzem level, within worldly parameters, what a house is. It's not becoming for you to sleep in the street. It's not becoming for you to walk and eat. This is already going down to the practical level, within the worldly experience. But this worldly experience has an element of the oil hanefesh. The minute we say it's not becoming, this is really an oil hanefesh. But it is an oil hanefesh that contains an akeli. And this is what we say in Atzilus is a memutza, and therefore Atzilus possesses both. And it has kelim, and the kelim are a real mitzias of chochmah vechesed. Not oil and soy, but specific qualities. Now we go inside. Chochmah vechesed hu ba'akelim davke. The real presence of chochmah vechesed is ba'akelim davke. It's only in the kelim. Above that, there is also chochmah vechesed, but it's not identified as individual inyan chochmah vechesed. This is emanating from Ayin Soif. V'gam, and then also, furthermore, in the kelim, yesh hagbala b'ispasha shalahem. There is a hagbala, there is a limit, b'ispasha shalahem, to what extent they can continue to express themselves, the kelim. This is, I'd like to, we'll, as I said, we don't skip anything, so I just want to explain what that refers to. Hagbala b'ispasha shalahem. There's an interesting, everyone knows the translation of the word Hagbala b'ispasha shalahem, that the ispasha, the extent to which they can be identified. There's an interesting halacha. The person makes a promise of tzedakah or the hegdish with amigdash, and he does not define specifically what he intends to give. But he made a promise. How does he satisfy this promise? So, the halacha says like this. The gizbar, so to speak, the gabbai who's zoker comes to him and he collects from him $1, $2, $10, $100, and he continues to take until the donor says, this I did not have in mind. Lo lekach hiskavanti. In other words, even though there's no limit to tzedakah, but because we are heirs, we came. In my case, I could not extend that far. Lo lekach is kavant. When you say that you give a limit to an Indian like tzedakah, you're not talking about the oil of tzedakah. The oil, there's no limit. That limit comes from tzedakah. I can't perceive this kind of a gift from a kelim level. Basically, Atzilus also there is a Hagbola b'yispasha shelahem. How far do these Yonim of chochmah, vechesed, of Atzilus, how far do they extend? Let's continue. As for example, what the Gemara says, Shiur Koima. Shiur Koima. Shall Yetzer Bereishis. The measure of the height, the Koima means the height, of Yetzer Bereishis, of the creator of Bereishis, the initial creator of the world. Reish, Lamed, Vav, Alofim, and Vav is Parsois. 236,000, and then the 1,000 multiplied by 10,000. Parsois, miles. This is how big Yetzer Bereishis is, in terms of miles and number of miles. Communion, where do we get this? Communion, like the number of Rav Koyach. But Rav Koyach has a gematria of this, and refers ultimately to this number. What does that mean? This is his size. There's no limit, absolutely, to it, so to speak. There's no size. Yesh leimar. But this refers to the Shiur Hagbola Zois. Now this Hagbola, this measure, hu kmei shehu bibiyah. This is how this Inyan of Elokus is expressed in biyah, in the world. Bria Tzira Asiyah. V'hainu, which means the kashenim shall be brio, that when the Yetzer Bereishis, when the oil Eliki from Atzilus, his name shall be brio, is brought down into brio, who b'bchinas mishpah. It has that quality of that kind of a number. Abo ba'atzilus, but within Atzilus, einon b'bchinas shir umido AyinBase pashtusa. Within Atzilus, the spheres are not yet measurable in terms of his pashtus, in terms of how far they can extend. Within Atzilus, they're all oir. That's why Atzilus is called Atzilus. That's emanation. This is oir eliki. But nevertheless, these oir eliki is misrabish in kelim, and from the kelim it goes on into bria, and there it has a real measure. And as I explained elsewhere, the klolus inyan hagvul de kelim. It's explained, but what is ultimately the meaning, inyan, the point of the gvul that kelim present? Who shetia bohem v'al yodom. The inyan for hagbola v'kelim is that through them there should be hagbola chutz la'atzilus. That they should affect the hagbola, a limit outside of Atzilus. Avo ba'atzilus gufo, but within Atzilus itself, einon b'bchinas gvul. They are not in a state of gvul. Okay, now we're coming to this very fine distinction. Just as we have the example of the tzedakah. A person gives a promise tzedakah. From the perspective of the promise of the oil, of the nefesh that he is promised as tzedakah, it's a nefesh expression. It is not an expression based on some kind of a worldly situation. And therefore that itself does not encompass any limit. But when that comes to expression on a worldly platform, then he begins to think from on that platform. Then he says, "Oh yeah, I did not intend that." Where does he realize the limit? When it is expressed on a worldly platform, not in the sense of Doki itself. That same oil that is expressed on the worldly platform, that oil itself, the way it is in the nefesh, in him himself, there is no limit. In other words, it is not that I would not want to give any more tzedakah, but I cannot perceive stretching out like that. That is where it is expressed on the moral level. And this is the meaning that we say Natzilus is a memutze, and Natzilus facilitates the connection between Ein Sof and moral, because in Natzilus itself it's Ein Sof, but it is capable of being expressed on the moral level, and there it becomes, in fact, limited and measurable. And the reason that it is possible to be expressed on a world level, that is because of the kelim. V'zehu ma shekosu b'sefer Yitzira. And this is what the Sefer Yitzira says, Midoson oy eser shein lahem sof. That their measure is 10 without an end, but they don't have an end. Umevud b'makimachi. This expression in Sefer Yitzira, Midoson eser shein lahem sof, is explained elsewhere, Shezeu gam b'bchinas hakelim. That this in and that ein lahem sof is true in the bechina of the kelim also. Shein lahem gevul, that the kelim do not have a limit, k'moi shehem ba'atzilus, in the level where they are within atzilus. And the gvul that is present in kelim is only when they come into bria, but not within atzilus itself. As we gave the example of the person giving tzedakah. Within the reality of his own nefesh, there is no limit. But when you start looking at it, the way it expresses itself on practical world, he says, no, I can perceive that.
Can you repeat that last point? Sorry, I missed that.
I'm giving you an example of this.
Yeah.
Within the sense of generosity, the sense of, yes, I want to give. See, let me explain. Generosity, there are two aspects of generosity. I see someone in need and I want to help him. That's already on the moral level. There's just the sense of chesed that whatever it's, I want to express myself. I want to give out whatever I have. That's a generosity. There is no limit. In essence. But when you start looking at it on a practical level, how much did you give? Oh, I can't even perceive that much. When you lay it out, so to speak, in Mokim Uzman, I can't perceive that much.
When you have it only in the middle, it feels like it's just an open kind of.
That's right. Only in the middle, in the Oiron middle, and the middle as it is in the Nefesh, in Atzilus, not the way it is in Bria.
So where's the Mamutza aspect of Atzilus? It senses the limitlessness.
Okay, we have to finish that.
Okay.
I will become Mokon. Okay, this is the answer to your question. I will become Mokon. But even so, Gam Kmoi Sheheim Ba'atzilus. Also, or even as the spheres are within Atzilus, Heim Bebechinas Mitzius Midas Mikoichas. They have an aspect, an identifiable aspect, what's called Midas and Koichas. Although they don't have an inherent limit.
Why is it that it's only felt in the Kalim? And why is it that the Midah only comes to reveal in the worldly level?
Because when there is the sense of the Etzem Ha'oyer, Etzem HaNefesh, it inherently has no limit. In the world there is a limit. Why? Because in the world everything has a source. And it depends how much I have, that's how much I can give. The Nefesh does not have how much I have. This is an Atzmi.
When we've given the example of a Melech who does not have any limits, he would not be on a worldly level?
Okay, so the Melech, the Melech also. The idea of a Melech is not the way he is unto himself, but his hashpah on the people. That's the difference. That's the primary thing in a Melech. Melech ha'olam. And in this sense, Melech ha'olam, the provision for the people, for the world, has to go through Malchus, because Malchus recognizes the Metzius of the world. Otherwise, it would be overwhelming. It's a lot to speak in order to bring out the whole point, just very briefly. A melech is way above any limit. But he is a melech alam, which means how is he a melech alam if he doesn't have a limit? The recognition in the melech is that if not for the fact that he is a melech, there would be a limit. In other words, outside of his mitzias, there is a limit. He can perceive that by the people there is a limit.
So his hashpah is limited, but not because he lacks, but because the people lack. The people have a limit.
There's a famous quote from the Queen of England. Where the people, they complained to her, people don't have any bread. So she said, let them eat cake. Everybody knows that quote. It's a
French mamzelle.
French mamzelle. Let them, that's more like it, right?
Marie Antoinette.
Marie
Antoinette? Yeah.
Let him eat cake. What does that tell you?
She didn't perceive the limits of her people.
She had no relationship to the people. She was not a malki. She was just a spoiled, wealthy individual. A melech knows what's going on. That's what a melech is. He's supposed to give chayes to the people. She had no idea. That was not a melech. That's why a melech does know and does relate to the people, not because of his limit, but because he relates to the people. Because that's the whole meaning of the melech, that he wants to be mashpia to the people. Doesn't want to make the people malachim, but he wants to provide for the people what a melech can provide. All right. At least we broke through this evening. So let this be today's shir. We'll pick up tomorrow, Mitzvah again. Have a great day.